What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be going over how I set up my hardcore Stormclaw Druid for completing tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons here in Season 2. And this video is basically going to go over what gear pieces I use, what vampiric powers I use, as well as the skills and the elixir that I choose to run when I'm doing a tier 100 Nightmare Dungeon. I'm also going to go over how I achieve low life for using low life Bulwark. So this video is going to be really useful, especially for those players who haven't done a tier 100 dungeon yet. There might be even some tips for those who aren't even using Druid. Now, before we get started, I would like to say there will be a link to this build as well as the Mobalytics page with this build on it down in the description below, as well as a link to my bossing guide for my hardcore Stormclaw Druid as well. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I like to do before we start our tier 100 dungeon run is to go ahead and go into the training ground now that we have that resource available to us and check out my armor and my resistances to make sure they are reaching the cap for tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons, which for armor it's 13,400, which we are meeting, and for resistances obviously those are 70% across the board. So having those capped out is incredibly important for reducing damage while you're doing tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons, and I would not run them without those caps. Now moving on to our equipment, we're running a Tempest Roar on the helmet. Now if you would like to, you could obviously swap this out to a Godslayer crown for more damage, or my personal best in slot piece here would be Harlequin Crest for the extra ranks to Bulwark, as we are running a low life Bulwark build. However, I just haven't gotten one to drop yet this season. For our chest piece, I'm running Mad Wolf's Glee, as this is my favorite chest piece for my builds. However, you can obviously swap this out for a normal chest piece with higher damage reduction rolls if you're having a problem with survivability. Now for our gloves, the one unique I swear by, and I love this unique for doing dungeons, is Frostburn. So Frostburn's really great because we're always proccing that freeze because we're attacking so fast. And honestly, it provides a lot of indirect damage reduction because the enemies that are frozen obviously cannot attack you. And another thing it does that's really cool is that those enemies that tend to explode after you kill them, like those big giant corpse dudes or the giant spider guys, they won't explode if they're frozen. So it's another great way of adding some indirect damage reduction. And we're also going to get quite a nice damage boost because we're going to use specific vampiric powers that will play into the freeze aspect of the Frostburn gauntlets. Then for our pants, we are running the aspect of Mending Stone for that increased duration of Bulwark. However, you could also run the aspect of Might if you want a more damage reduction. I just like to have that increased duration on my Bulwark so I don't have to worry too much about not having it on cooldown if I need to utilize it again. And the most important affix here is obviously total armor and damage reduction while injured. For the boots, we're just running a symbiotic aspect because we want to get that cooldown on our non-ultimate skills, and we're also doing some damage reduction while injured, as well as total armor while in werewolf form. And for our weapon, we're just using the same Greater Staff of Crone I had in my bossing video, as I haven't gotten a better one since. For our amulet, we're running the rapid aspect, and we are getting the double roll on armor. That helps us reach that armor cap without using disobedience or a potion, or I should say an elixir. Then for our first ring, we're running the overcharge aspect. It's my favorite aspect this season, and honestly, it does a ton of damage, not just to single targets, but to multiple enemies at the same time. And this will play into our second ring. But for the affixes, we're getting crit strike, chance, vulnerable damage, which I would prefer critical strike damage or damage to distant enemies there, just to pump up my Thunderstruck node. I just haven't gotten a good ring with all four of my favorite aspects. And then we're also getting damage to close enemies as well as lucky hit chance. Now for our second ring, we are going to run Erida's Exonerable Will, as I find this ring to be a lot of fun to use, even though it's not really the best in slot ring to have. Now, if you did want to swap it out, which most people will, I would just swap it right back over to a Runeworker's ring and go for those same affixes, crit strike chance, damage to close enemies, lucky hit chance, and if you could get lucky enough to get a fourth affix, that critical strike damage or damage to distant enemies. That would be my preferred choice, but again, I like to have a little bit of fun with Erida's Exonerable Will. Now for our vampiric powers, and the first one we're going to use is Domination, and it's really great because not only do we get a lot of immobilize directly from this build, but because we're using our Frostburn gauntlets, we're also getting a lot of freezes, so we get a ton of multiplicative damage towards those enemies that are under those control effects. Then we're going to be picking up Resilience, and most people run Undying, but because we're running a low life Bulwark build, we get a lot of damage reduction from Resilience, especially because our life pool will be so low. Then it's going to be the standard Ravenous, and Moonrise to increase our attack speed, and then Metamorphosis just for the constant unstoppable buff. Now for our Spirit Boons, we're just going to be running Weariness on the Deer, standard Avian Wrath, and Sight Talons, pretty much like it is in the build on Mobalytics. Then we're going to use Pack Leader instead of Calamity, so we reset our Poison Creeper, and then Overload for some more damage. Now, I do want to say that we are not running Heightened Malice on our Paragon board. However, if you would like, you can take out some of the damage node points I have allocated and just move those Paragon points into Heightened Malice if you prefer. And for our skills, we're going to be running Earthen Bulwark, Petrify, Hurricane, Claw, Cyclone, and then Poison Creeper. And then for our elixir, as I said in my previous video, I like to run the Elixir of Cruelty for that increased critical strike chance. You can also run the Elixir of Combat and Fortune for that increased lucky hit chance, or you can run the Elixir of Savagery to increase your critical strike damage. Other honorable mentions, if you're not reaching caps, obviously Elixir of Magic Resist, or Iron Skin Elixir for more armor. Now that we're done with looking over everything, I'm going to go ahead and use my potions and then go out and get low life so that way we can use our low life bulwark. So the first thing I like to do when I'm running low life bulwark is to go out to the overland to find a few monsters that I can safely get below that 35% health threshold so I can get that damage reduction while injured, as well as get that nice damage reduction from resilience. And once we achieve that, you'll see our health bar is blinking. We can let ourselves get a little bit lower if we'd like to, but you really don't have to. And we'll go ahead and pop our bulwark, kill off these enemies, and then teleport back to town. So now that we have everything set up appropriately and we are below that 35% health threshold so we can get that nice damage reduction, let's go ahead and teleport into our Tier 100 Nightmare Dungeon.
I must wait.
So as you can see there, guys, we made it through the deserted underpass pretty easily there. I did try to slow roll it a little bit just to show you guys the damage and the overall survivability of the build, but I'm pretty happy with that run. And honestly, I know that's a run that a lot of people have a problem with because of all the poison. So I figured I'd go ahead and show you a low life bulwark there in that area just to kind of showcase the survivability with just the low life bulwark itself. Now, like I said, there is a ton of damage reduction still missing from this build. I think roughly about 35% damage reduction if you add up the Harlequin crest as well as some of the lower rolls of damage reduction I have on my gear. My Mad Wolf's Glee is missing about 10% damage reduction from poisoned enemies, and my damage reduction while injured could be a little bit better on some of my rolls, but we still made it through a tier 100 pretty easily, and I'm pretty happy overall with the build as it is currently. So with all that being said, that is the end of the video. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and post them out in the comment section below. I will gladly answer them as soon as I see them. I will be linking this build as well as a build to my boss guide down in the description section below. But that's all for me. I hope you guys are having a great day and a great night, depending on wherever you're from, and also a happy Thanksgiving. I know tomorrow is the day, but if I don't see you, have a good one. Peace out. I will see you in the next one.